You're listening to Rebel Spirituality with me, Sam Goldfinch. Here's the truth. Wisdom doesn't follow rules. So each week we're going to explore what it means to wake up your way so you can live a more peaceful, creative and inspired life no matter your circumstances. It's time to blaze your unique path to truth.
It's because there's this quote by Sid Banks, and I think I'll read it because I think it's very powerful, and it's in one of his audios, and he said, and it's something that always struck me, and he says, seriousness, like life, is a thought, and this thought creates a feeling, and if you create the feeling of seriousness, then you're in a very serious state. You are liable to have stress, strain and sickness and unhappiness and jealousy and everything else because of seriousness. And then he laughed, and then he said, now seriousness doesn't help you do anything in life but destroy yourself.
Hey friend, so you just heard a snippet of today's conversation, which I have with my good friend George Halfin, and we talk a lot about the inside out understanding, which of course you will have heard me talk about before in this podcast. George talks about the three principles and innate health, which are different ways of pointing towards the same thing. And some of you will have a very deep understanding of that. Some of you will be kind of new to it. So I just wanted to say, if any of you have been touched by this podcast and, you know, the kinds of things that I talk about, and you'd like to take a deeper dive into that understanding and the work that Sid Banks brought into the world, you just heard a quote from Sid Banks there, read by George. I will be bringing a group of people together, most likely in October, to explore this in a program. So, you know, I'll give you all the information about that. If you'd like to be on the waitlist, there's a link in the show notes, and I'll be kind of releasing information and sign up throughout September, I guess. And yeah, we'll go on a journey together and learn about, you know, how to live a life less serious, the title of today's podcast, and just live more effortlessly, how to do this human thing with less struggle and more joy. And yeah. And, you know, George's book, I'll put the link in the show notes for that as well. It's a fantastic resource embedded in this understanding. Okay, team, without further ado, I'll hand you over to me and George. See you there. This is really exciting. I've got my friend George with me. Hey, George, nice to see you.
Hi, Sam. Great to see you.
Yeah, and I was just sort of thinking, well, we were chatting together thinking, how should we start this chat? And I was like, well, it might be nice to just say how we met. I actually think it feels longer, but I think we bumped into each other in Spain in November.
Yeah, right? in November. And it was funny because I'd always, Viva's like this get together. I wouldn't like to call it a conference because that sounds too formal.
Yeah, I get it.
And it's much more fun than that. And it's been going quite a few years, and I'd always wanted to go. But it's always my husband's birthday when it's on, and I've got younger kids. Yeah. And it was my 50th birthday, and I was like, I really want to go.
Yeah, well, you made it. It's great.
So I made it. And it was amazing on lots of levels, but also to go away on my own, which I hadn't done for so long, and to be in a place where I kind of knew people, but I wasn't with friends, so I had freedom to meet with and just be a free spirit, which really liberating.
I had the privilege of in amongst that free spiritedness to meet you, and we got talking, and you know,
you had a bit of a giggle, I remember.
Yeah, it was great fun. And yeah, I love how you put it, because when people are talking to me about these things, there's quite a few things that aren't conferences and they're not retreats. There's sort of some other amazing thing in the middle. And yeah, we had a lot of fun, and you know, I spoke to you about your amazing book that you've put together. So that will come up, I'm sure. Yeah. And we were saying that, you know, essentially there's all sorts of ways this conversation could go. So we're just going to see where it goes, right?
Exactly. We're just going to see where it goes, or where wisdom takes us.
Awesome. Okay. So, well, the first thing I'd like to say is, you know, when I talking to you about your book and the title, A Life Less Serious, I mean, it's funny, this month of Rebel, with the podcasts that have gone out and things I've been writing, A Life Less Serious is at the heart of it. And one of the things that I'd most love, one of my heart's desires for anybody who comes into my orbit, is to just take that sigh and just loosen up and lighten up. Because for me, life was anything but light. Life was pretty serious. And there's that George Orwell quote, life's too important to be taken seriously. It's one of my favorites. And so how did the title come up? Was that after the creation of the book? Was that something you led with? Like, where did that come from?
I think it struck me years before.
Got it.
And I wrote it down, but it's because there's this quote by Sid Banks, and I think I'll read it because I think it's very powerful. And it's in one of his audios, and he said, and it's something that always struck me. And he says, seriousness, like life, is a thought. And this thought creates a feeling. And if you create the feeling of seriousness, then you're in a very serious state. You are liable to have stress, strain, and sickness, and unhappiness, and jealousy, and everything else because of seriousness. And then he laughed, and then he said, now, seriousness doesn't help you do anything in life but destroy yourself. And he said it, and he said it in a honest way. And at the end, there was quite a lightheartedness to it, because I think and there's power in that, because he's not saying there aren't serious things. You know, Sid Banks always said, you know, that life is a contact sport.
Sure.
And it is a contact sport. And believe, you know me, I'm going through a lot of contact sportness at the moment.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say you can have serious circumstances, but it doesn't mean that you have to get really serious about it.
I love that.
And you have to get really in your head about it. Because I guess I've been on a journey. I think you like to call it an inside out understanding. I like to call it innate health. I like to call it whatever works. But I guess I've been on a journey with this understanding for, I guess, 15, 16 years now. And I guess when I came to it by chance. And I can tell that story if you want. But at that time, I was someone who really was, who'd let their intellect rule, who really listened to their head, who overthought things, who got quite anxious about things, who fueled seriousness innocently, not realizing it.
Yeah.
And I had lost touch with, and pointing to my heart. I'm pointing to my, I guess I guess the way I see it is probably my soul, or you might call it mind. And I saw things so much through working things out and in my head that I'd lost touch with really what was underneath. And I guess as the years have gone on, my eyes have turned much more in that direction. And I know that that's where the ease of life comes from. And I know that that's where the wisdom, and when you follow that, life is a lot easier. And that, I think, in difficult circumstances, it's very easy to lose touch with that, because we think we need to work things out. We think we kind of know we're not in control, but we think that we can. If we just work hard, if we just do, and actually there's a power in acceptance and surrendering and giving space for something else to come through.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to myself here. It's really funny, but I guess I'm talking to you too. But I guess, allowing that space, that's something else to come through. And that's really sometimes quite hard, I think, because it's so easily precluded. And sometimes it's hard to be in touch with your wisdom, your soul, or your heart, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it, Sam. Maybe you have another word for it.
Yeah. All of the above. Yeah. Well, I really hear that piece about surrender. Look, this is as it is. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to change things. It doesn't mean that we don't want to work towards something new or whatever, any of that. But it's that inner kind of, I mean, it's funny. I was talking about, I was going to say, I was just about to ask you if I can swear. I was like, well, it's your podcast, Sam. Why did you make your own decisions, man? There's a book by a guy called John Parkin called Fuck It, The Ultimate Spiritual Way. And it seems to me that those inner moments of fuck it are actually moments of just, do you know what? It is as it is. What things are, and then there's just this moment of something new that opens up, because for as long as we're kind of arguing with life, there's that Byron Katie quote, every time you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. And
Love that.
like that, it's kind of like that. It just makes room for something new, and it is easy to forget and go off on thought trains and mind spirals or whatever they are, for us, and then we can catch sight. The nice thing is there's a real wisdom in that, because that is a signal. I think Bill Pettit calls them love letters back home, right?
Yeah. And I think, sometimes in our society, there's a pressure for us to work everything out, but instead of, and in that, there's no space for anything else to come through. And actually, sometimes when you really accept things, then there's space to see what makes sense to do, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that just occurred to me to say. So I think part of it's that, but I think part of it's like you say, I think it is that fuck it thing. It is like, go with it. And I remember, like, when I was coming up for the idea for the book, like, obviously the title came years before, and it kept coming back to me, and then I the idea for the book came in lockdown, when I was very reluctantly homeschooling my kids.
You and many others, I think. Yeah.
And many others, yeah. And I was like, I noticed that was like hiding in my phone, as I'm sure a lot of parents were, looking at the panic WhatsApps and, sending memes to each other to try and make light of the situation, but inwardly like, oh God. And I remember one day I was out with them in the park, and I really was disappearing, hiding in my phone, and I really wasn't present to the wonder of my kids and them playing, and I wasn't present at all because I was hiding. And I thought there was a power in that. And then you could read in the book, there's a very powerful story about, I could read it, but it would take time. So I think, I won't go into that now, but I think there's a very powerful story about someone who saw beyond the difficult circumstances in a very powerful situation. And what struck me about that story was that if they could see through beyond those circumstances and find peace in that situation, then anyone can. And then what struck me was I knew loads of people who had done that. And because I've been involved in this community a long time, and I worked for a charity that, run events in the community, I knew lots of people who had these powerful stories. And I felt in lockdown, wouldn't it be a gift to people to share those stories so that they could help see beyond their difficult circumstances, but also because I believe, and I still believe that when we're able to see beyond not just difficult circumstances, but have more perspective and everything else, it frees you up. No matter what you're going for, it frees you up to be more of a force for changing the world.
Yeah. And
that to me is my driving force. When we can, to make space, when we can see beyond, when we have that gift. And I think this understanding gives us this gift. And I think I'm not saying this understanding exclusively, because, it's really interesting. We were, Sam and I, at a conference recently, and they said that 43% of the population, everyone has this understanding. We all have this understanding. It's not unique to people who know about the three principles or insight understanding. It's in all religions, it's in all cultures, and it's innate to all of us. It's just it gets covered over by our intellect, which is sadly, fueled by our education system and the way we're brought up and the system. And we could go on about that. But, but when we get eyes for our wisdom and intuition, so much more opens up, and there's so much space.
Yeah.
And for me, I do get involved in interfaith relations. I do, as I said to Sam, I run a Jewish Muslim listening space. And to me, there's real power, especially at the moment, in coming together as humans, as interconnected humans. We are, we all have our own lived experience, and no one can speak for anyone else's lived experience, and no one can say, and we are all intersectional beings. And when I say intersectional, just to explain, just in case people don't understand, like I'm a woman, and I'm neurodivergent. I said we all have different intersections. It's the interplay of different things we have in our lives. And we all have, and we can't speak, we can only speak for ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't speak for others ever. And sadly, in this world where shades of grey are disappearing, I feel, and people are really, where shades of grey are disappearing, it's really, for me, I'm very passionate about shared humanity and coming together in conversations of shared humanity. And I think, yeah.
Well, it's important, and it's courageous as well, and I really honor it. And finding spaces where we can sit in our shared humanity and, unite in the uniqueness of the form, but also the absolute unity. Well, the unity that's in everything, but the uniqueness, but also the place where we're all exactly the same. So there's that kind of, from the human mind, it looks like this paradoxical split, doesn't it, between the formless and the form, which of course is just one thing, if it's even a thing. But I think being able to kind of sit in that space and listen to each other is, I'm really with you, George. I think, it seems like the world and tech and, yada, yada, all that stuff that we get caught on is either programmed or programming itself to split people into those two different sides. Yeah. So anything we can do to kind of sit with people, because, it's one of those strange things where the kinds of stuff that people think and how they relate to each other online, for example, is so different to when we're just sat in a room with each other. Things happen that would never happen in a room.
Completely.
So is that, so are those things that you run monthly, or what? Or how do they?
I just do it monthly, and it's like, and we know it's really I do it with a Muslim coach Farah, who's in the book, and I found her through a Three Principles website, Facebook group actually, called What the F is the Principles, and we were meant to meet each other. It's very special actually. I met her, and she happened to live in this town, and I said, oh, my friend lives there too, and she's very tall, and her kids are very tall too, and my friend's kids were in her kids' class, and so it was like we were meant to meet.
Yeah.
And so since then we've run these spaces, and we never know who's gonna. It's linked to Nista Nashim, which is a Jewish Muslim women's network, and we never know who's going to show up and what they're going to show up with, and we really just, it could be personal issue, it could be that they're caring for someone, it could be anything. We never know, and we just sit there and we listen and we reflect, help people draw out their wisdom. And it could be about anything. And it could be about dealing with difficult situations regarding what's going on in the world as well. Mm-hmm. But we never know. And it's a real gift, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just because I think people will have, for anyone who's listening, your book is a collection of stories from an amazing group of women, and one of the reasons I like this, I think in the spiritual space, inside out space, whatever, all of this space, self-development, etc., there's room for everything. And of course some of that is the very kind, like my good mate Jamie Smart, who writes in a very particular kind of way that people really appreciate, and he's very kind of like clear, black and white, and then story and things that are kind of, I don't know, softer, for lack of a better term. I think, and one of the things I love about this book is that I think you could get, if somebody was, and there will be, by the way, there's a lot of people listening to this, George, who would be like, what are the three principles? Because they've come through to my world from a number of different ways. And you could give them your amazing book and they'd just be able to read it and get something amazing from it. So I think you've done a fantastic job of, and I know that it says edited by George Halfin. I feel like you did far more than edit this.
You know what? It was a calling. It really was. It was a calling. And I'm so glad you said that, because I really set out to have as diverse a group of people as I possibly could. Mm-hmm. And I started off speaking to people I knew, and then they recommended other people. And I thought it was really important to have a really diverse range of people in the group. So there's people from different countries, nationalities, there's, people from all different backgrounds and cultures, and sharing their experiences, and very different experience in all aspects of life. And I also wanted it, like you say, to be really accessible, because there's lots of books about the inside out understanding and about the principles and about, talking about explaining it or seeing it from a different perspective in a business context. I read loads of them. I'm a readaholic, but I do read all of them. And for me, I thought that, stories are so powerful.
Yeah. No doubt.
And to me, I felt like, in the introduction, I don't even try and give an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I just talk about the wisdom and how it's at the root of everything and let people find out themselves. Because it's interesting, when I learned about this understanding, I'll tell you a little story. I was very lucky. I stumbled across this understanding because I wasn't looking for it. I had finished a job and I was looking for a new job, and my cousin's wife happened to work at this charity and they taught it, and I didn't know anything about it. And I was asked to organise the first conference, and I did it how I did everything back then, taking it all very seriously and running around like a blue-ass fly trying to do this conference. And I remember that they were delivering chairs, and I said, I can't possibly disturb my colleagues, they're in a meeting. And I ran in to a glass door and smashed my face in and welcomed people to the first Free Principles conference with two black eyes, which was quite entertaining. Really entertaining.
It's a good story now.
And there began my journey into the Free Principles. And I must admit, it was really good because I was like running around all kinds of conferences, but I did get to listen to a glimpse of it, and I really saw the power in it. And afterwards, Rabbi Shah Rosenberg asked me to stay on to help organise some events, and they sent me to America. I was very lucky, and I went to Santa Clara County. Wow. where people who don't know that there was a time when in Santa Clara County in California, they had a Three Principles sort of department, as it were, and they were, teaching in homeless shelters, in prisons, etc. And I was very lucky that I went to a homeless shelter with a nun called Sister Margarita. And I remember, I was thinking, coming from England, I was thinking, God, to be in a homeless shelter in England is one thing, but to be in a homeless shelter in America is even another. And I remember we got there, and, the people came in, and she asked them, what's their weather report? And they were like, stormy, gloomy, cloudy and all this. And then she put on this Sid Banks video, and I was making notes and trying to work out what we were saying, not understanding a word of it. And after 20 minutes, she turned off the video, and they would look like different people. And then they were like saying the most profound things, like, I'm not who I thought I was. And it was like, and one guy came up and he was all smartly dressed and came to thank her, and that he'd sorted himself out. And I was like, how long have they been learning about this? I was like, 2 years. She's like, this is their second session. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, really. And so for me, like, my intellect got in my way, like, so much. I couldn't hear anything. And I was just lucky that I worked in a place where they used to hold a women's group every week, and I used to sit in, and somehow it started to work on me rather than I work on it. And and that's why I think there's a real power. And I love that Sid Banks quote, and I love listening sometimes to Sid Banks because there's a space beyond the intellect. And I think there's a power in stories in that as well, because there's something comes through in stories. And it's just occurred to me now as we've been talking, I hadn't thought about that before actually, that stories, the feeling of stories can get beyond the intellect. Boom.
I mean, it looks to me like, Joseph Campbell used to talk about the hero's journey and the monomyth, this one pattern that's been playing out, which you see in all the great blockbusters from Harry Potter to Lord of the Rings to all this stuff. They play this kind of, someone's struggling, there's a call to adventure, they go into the abyss, they come back with the elixir. And I think in if you were to look for that pattern that's playing out in each of these stories, George, and that's it. It looks to me like it's almost like a Trojan horse, like not in a sneaky way, but it just kind of allows something to move in beyond the mind, if you like, the intellectual mind, and then we hear something and we feel something. So 100%, that looks like the magic. I love that. I have a feeling that you knew that, even if you didn't know it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think there's also something, I think, in having different voices and different styles and different, and also because, let's face it, a lot of us are very busy, and I might be a readaholic, but most people don't have time. I like to read to wind down and to stretch myself before I go to bed, but like a lot of people don't have time for that. So we set the word limit at like a blog style size, so they're no more than 1,500 words. You can dip in, dip out, you can read the whole thing, you can go back to it. I, and who've read it, you can imagine hundreds of times dip into it now.
Yeah.
And also I think it's helpful to point to the way it unfolded as well. Maybe there's some power in that for people.
Yeah,
Because I
sure.
had this idea and it kept coming back to me. And I was in lockdown and I was furloughed and then I was, going back to work. But I still, it kind of, I wrote some of it at 5 a.m. because when inspiration struck. And then I
Yeah.
spoke to some people about it. And then, kindly Carol Burrows, who's in it, offered to help edit it with me. And then I met someone else, Lucy, who I'd never met before. She also, so I read all the stories and put what I thought were edits. And then I wanted to sense check it, not just that it was from me, that others with an understanding would sense check it. So they also co-edit it with me to check, that everyone, because what I wanted it to do is that people who didn't have an understanding of call could pick it up.
Yeah.
Whether they had this understanding or not, and it was accessible for everybody. So they sense checked it. And then through the community, I knew this amazing illustrator because way back then the kids were little, we'd organised a Three Princess family gathering where we'd gone camping, and a family that came on it, she was an illustrator, and so I got in touch with her, and then it all emerged. But it kind of, people talk about flow, but it kind of, one conversation led to another, and it had a life of its own.
Yeah.
And there's beauty in that. And even I forget that now because it wasn't, there was a lot of work in it. And then it was really funny because the day that was launching, the day before, my son cut his head open. And I was launching it from the hospital waiting room. Trying to get an internet connection at the Royal Free Hospital.
Life's a contact sport.
Yeah, life's a contact sport, right? So yeah, I'd forgotten that. It's really quite, it's quite funny. And I think that's it. Like, we keep talking about life being contact sport, but I think there's lots of humour as well in those situations. Yeah. And we can be in dark times and difficult times, but we can also laugh at it, and we can also be kind to ourselves. And I think there's also something, I think we live in a society that's so like driven towards happiness and being happy, but that's really not where it's at for me.
Well, it's a super powerful thing to see. And I think one of the things that can happen is this, I think we kind of have a lot of almost maybe superstition's the wrong word, belief systems around, well, if you're going through something difficult or serious in your life, you have to feel serious and heavy the whole way through. And it's like, well, actually, maybe we made that up. What if we can actually go through some really serious, for lack of a better term, or heavy or
challenging,
and laugh and lighten up. And it's funny because I just spent a whole weekend with a lovely group of people. And at the end, I was asked to kind of share what I would share with somebody based on 4 or 5 years worth of journey. And I said that life doesn't have to be so hard, even if it's hard.
Yeah.
There's this paradox in the middle of that and I'm not saying of course, like we can innocently get caught up at any time, but we can also lighten up at any time as well. We can catch sight of something new and fresh, right?
Definitely. And I think even when things are difficult, like we're going through some challenging circumstances at the moment, and the community talks about paying attention to the feeling, and it's not like you have to be in a good feeling state all the time,
no,
at all. And but I think, and I want to say about that as well. Like to me, it's about allowing those feelings as well. If you're sad, you're sad. It's okay. I think, in my 20s and 30s, when I was eternally single, I remember I once cried for 3 days, and then I went, I'm upset. I'm not allowed to be upset. I've got a good life. Why should I be upset? And I literally went in a circle for 3 days going, you shouldn't be upset. You're entitled to do that. Like, because it was a bank holiday and I lived by myself. This is pathetic. Yeah. And then until I was like, oh, okay, you are allowed to be upset. And then it went. And I literally caught myself in the cycle of not allowing myself. So I think there is sometimes we get like that. Like we think that we shouldn't, but actually there's freedom in experiencing emotions and feeling upset, or, there's a place for anger because it can fuel, there's a space for it as well. Sometimes we need it to act, obviously not, waiting for the red mist to pass and waiting
Yeah.
work out what's the best thing to do. But it doesn't mean to say that you should be happy about everything that's going on in the world, or happy about, if it's coming from a place of wisdom.
That's it.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that, to me, it's about just, again, going back to acceptance, isn't it? Accepting, that we're in and out of these moods, and up, sometimes we'll see things from a low state of mind,
Yeah.
and sometimes we'll see things, but that we know that, the waters will eventually settle, and things will be calmer, and we'll see things clearer. And when you're caught up, that you can't see anything else but caught upness, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And not to fight that, because that just keeps you in it.
I'm
Which is,
really
I think,
pleased.
the example I've just tried to share with you.
No, and it's a beautiful one, and I'm glad you've shared it. And I talk about this a lot because I think it's innocent, but I think it's a misunderstanding that can happen where people think, well, I'm supposed to feel good all the time, like you said, and it's like Sid was struck by, he moved from being, by his own kind of description, an insecure guy, to then suddenly seeing the source of that, and then coming to live a life with a lot more, I guess, as he would say, beautiful feelings. But the interesting thing is, it's like, I don't think he was ever saying that you're supposed to be there all the time or something. It's like because that just becomes something that we can weaponize. It's another stick to beat ourselves with.
Exactly.
And I've spoken to a lot of people who've said to me, I actually spoke to a lady last year who said to me, the worst thing about all of this is I'm doing it to myself. I said, well, hang on a minute. I was like, it's not like you woke up 2 months ago and said, and now I'm going to feel like shit for 2 months, is it? Let's really explore what we mean by, it's like, yes, your experience is being created in a certain way, but the idea that it's not that though, right? And I think it's an important nuance to talk about, because that beautiful quote that everybody wheels out, which is one of Sid's bangers, like the whole, if the only thing that people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. He's not saying if the only thing that people learned was how to constantly be in it. He was like, no, don't be afraid of anything that's coming up. And that to me is another way of saying surrender, non-resistance. And that non-resistance doesn't always, and that resistance, doesn't always show up as, oh God, I hate this, I don't want it. Sometimes it can just show up subtly or beneath the surface of like, I'm not supposed to be feeling like this. I've been hanging out with the principals for 15 years. This isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then sometimes I think it's interesting you say that. It's like, I was talking about the feeling state before, because like you can be going through a difficult time, and, and you can be resisting what is. And so you get in, and then you have to notice it, and then you come back.
Yeah.
But there's also something about like sometimes paying attention to the feeling, in the sense of, well, how can you create fun? How can you create outlets? How can you look after yourself, even in challenging circumstances?
Yeah.
What can you do? How can you engage with people or yourself or anything to create moments within those difficult circumstances and have fun and have a laugh, or whatever works for you? Yeah. Because, for you and for everyone else around you as well, because that's important, because it all starts with us. We can't help others if we can't. I mean, that's a given. So I guess that's something I'm exploring too right now. And I wanted to talk about, I think you and I mentioned a bit about neurodiversity, and I think it's important to mention that, because I think it is a kind of a missing piece a little bit.
I'm excited to talk about this, actually, because I think a lot of people in this community in particular are quite, I don't know what the right word is, confused about this, or like, I'm not sure how this fits in or something. So I like the way you phrase it, missing piece.
So I'm also like an inquiry about it, and I'm also like you. So I'll say for me that, I'm 50 and I recently got diagnosed with dyspraxia. Mm-hmm. And the reason I got diagnosed with dyspraxia is because my kids have various flavors of neurodiversity, and we noticed they didn't have such good working memory. And I realized, well, wait a minute, maybe my working memory isn't so good either. And, And I noticed it was really playing out at work. And I think that, people say that when you go through a hormonal change, that, it can affect, the coping mechanisms that you had like as a kid to a teenager, or I don't know, for men, but for women going before perimenopause and after, the coping, they just don't work as well anymore. And I think that's what happened to me.
Interesting.
The coping mechanisms I never realized, and people don't really talk about dyspraxia, and I'm on a learning journey about it as well. So I can only say what I know. I always thought about it as like, laughing, I'd bump into things and lack of coordination. And, in fact, I've still got my pee plates on my car because let's face it, takes me 15 minutes to park. And I only passed my passed my driving test at 44. And that was, no one believed me. And, I kept it a secret that I was learning. And I showed up to my parents with the test and no one believed me. No one believed me when I passed. It was just like,
so I believe you.
It was really, really funny. So, but I always thought, when you hear about dyspraxia, I laugh, and I know for other people it's very serious when it's like the coordination problems are so extreme. But for me, I never thought about it I never really knew about it. I never knew what it meant. I heard that, and so. But then at work, I guess it started to play out, and I guess, I guess I'm on a bit of a journey with that, and it's funny because I read my chapter in the book and I was quite sad this morning because it was talking about my journey with work and how, I had overcome a lot, and I had, thanks to the principles, the fact that I used to be quite an anxious person and I still have those sorts of anxiety, but they don't have me anymore is a miracle, really. Like I feel the miracle every day because I still get those.
I love how you put that. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's a miracle to me every day. And it's not to say I don't have it anymore. I don't have those thoughts. They just don't have me. And there are certain circumstances, believe me, that they do play up. But I know, and when I'm in the thick of it, I don't like it. But afterwards, I can laugh afterwards. And it's usually about technology or something stupid. Obviously I've made rules about technology and tax returns, as we all do. And, it's things like that usually really trigger me, which is ridiculous. But hey, we all have our ridiculous stuff. But I guess what I hadn't realized, and maybe you can relate to this too, is that, and I guess this is something I'm learning about neurodiversity, is that there are things that neurotypical people find very easy and that neurodivergent people can find very difficult. And there are things that we find as neurodivergent people very easy that neurotypical people don't find so easy, and we don't realize that because we're just in the whatever we're in, right? And I guess this is a journey I'm discovering, and I'm really lucky to work with someone to learn about more about this, and I'm on a journey to see where it leads. But I guess looking back what I wrote, and the fact I talked about that I got burnt out, and sadly I have got burnt out again, even with my understanding. Which is kind of a weird situation. And this time, really, my body said no more. Like it said, like I could feel it working very hard to do this job, like working very, very hard to do this job. And I was working very, very hard to do this job, and I couldn't see a way out. And, I think Dominic Scafidi talks about, the universe has your, go with, what's good and what you enjoy, and the universe has your back. And in this case, the universe really did have my back because my body and because I got to a point where, like, I all I can say is, I'd been crying in meetings and the camera off and all their stuff, and I just couldn't see a way out. And then my body said no, and it just couldn't focus anymore. And my wisdom the day before it was really miraculous, actually. It really miraculous. Basically, I always have scrawled notes about all my to-dos, and I did have a shared online to-do list, and somehow my wisdom typed up all my notes on my to-do list the day before this happened. So having never taken a day off sick and thinking I could never take time off work, I turn up and I literally couldn't function, and my line manager said, you need to sign yourself off and whatever. And then, but this to-do list was there. Isn't that miraculous?
Yeah. I mean,
just miraculous.
There's stuff going on at every level of the system that that's it. Miraculous. Like how amazing. And I love what you said. It's almost like, I know for me, I had an experience a good few years ago, but really got flawed for about 6 months, and I had to turn off a bunch of stuff. And burnout is the word that I've used for it as well. And my first response to it was, shit, now I've got to do a course on burnout. Because my fucking brain's like that. And then I had to like laugh at myself because like, Sam, chill, man. Like, this is not, relating to it as a problem. And then actually coming to realize, wow, this is a huge whack of wisdom. And I had been dialing down, not listening, the whole, the body talks, then it shouts, then it screams, yada, yada. And it was funny, for me, there was a whole bunch of things in there that I've kind of come to see around how I was orienting towards life and my business and that kind of thing that had kind of innocently got me there. And then I woke up to a new way of being and a new way of living, and shedding that old skin was something very powerful for me. But yeah, I think I love this discussion. I'm really struck by, and I think it's something that, throwing my microphone off. That whole thing about how, we are, neurology, neurodivergence, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like we're all different in that way. And I don't think that many people say what you said about, obviously if you've got ADHD or if you've got dyspraxia or, whatever is showing up, certain things will be challenging and certain things may be easier. And then for somebody, I have this conversation with Robin a lot, there's certain things that she finds really hard that just don't seem difficult to me, and vice versa. So we can all learn from each other. And it's something like, I mean, I don't know if you know, but I put together a podcast, God, I think it must be a couple of months ago, which was reflections on my ADHD diagnosis, like a few years down the line.
Okay.
This is worth listening, but
I'll definitely listen to that.
One of the things I say in there is, I think we can, regardless of whether our neurology works a certain way, whether there are kind of things that, talking about working memory, all these different kind of elements of what might show up for me or how it shows up for you and your reality and that kind of thing. The knowing who we are before and beyond that is really helpful. And the people that I've met who completely innocently, of course, believe they are who they think they are, and they haven't seen this deeper dimension of life, that can get really, really heavy for people. I've seen, a diagnosis being something where they feel like, well, here are the limits of what I've been told, here's how things are. These are the things you'll be capable of, and you'll just have to kind of accept that. And I think so many of those, it doesn't look like that to me.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt to me, like a running joke about me making a cup of tea. Like if I don't stand and make a cup of tea there and then, I'll forget it goes cold, it goes in the microwave, I'll forget it's in the microwave. Then I got to go back and turn the microwave on to heat this. And Robin will get back and she'll be like, there's a tea in the microwave. I'm like, shit, I forgot to have that tea. But I have to laugh about it, right? It's funny. It's kind of that kind of stuff used to be fodder for my mind to say, what the fuck? Can't you just make a cup of tea or whatever? And now it's something to laugh at, So our relationship to neurology, like all that kind of stuff is always, as I see it, is always going to be a deeper factor. I don't know how to talk about this than because our experience isn't coming from outside. And of course, our bodies and our brains are outside. People often think of outside as, outside the body. But Sid's talking about form, right? And this form that we're in, as beautiful as it is, and it's not all of us.
No.
And so, Marat, you talk about miracles. I think miracles can happen in terms of things that, my system is settled in ways that I genuinely didn't know was possible. And if I go back a few years when I was much more identified with kind of ADHD and as a welded to that and what was showing up in that space, it's been really powerful to see what happens, to have the courage to kind of say, I wonder what will show up if I honor how I am and how this body works, and actually have the courage to say, well, what if it doesn't mean, what if the limits that I've been told that the limits aren't actually the limits? Like, what will I see beyond that?
And I think I love that, because I think, we're from slightly different generations as well. And that, I'm like 50, and I think, there's people getting diagnosed my age and older. I met someone recently who got diagnosed at with autism at 60, and
Sure.
now
Yeah.
is like really passionate about supporting people. And I think it's really interesting because, you know, for me, it's like a missing piece in that, you know, I can look back and it kind of vindicates, maybe is the wrong word, but you know, I was struggling for a reason and I never understood why.
Got it. Yeah.
I felt like I was, you know, like I look at it like a duck underwater and the feet are really going and the topper looks calm, but underneath is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I guess that's probably why I got so sped up and all. I never realized that. And I guess that's something I'm coming to sort of, I'm on a journey to understand that. And that's why I think I said about the missing little piece of the puzzle. But I can also see it from your perspective that, you know, if you're told it, it can be self-limiting because then you live out of that. And so I guess it's stepping back. Isn't this beautiful that this understanding is all about like perspective? Like,
Yeah.
isn't it beautiful that it's all about, you know, the inside out nature, seeing it for what it is and gaining perspective and not defining ourselves, because, you know, with or without neurodiversity, we can all define ourselves. You
Well,
know,
you bet. Yeah.
you know, like we were talking about, you know, I had the real gift last week to spend time with Amy Chen-Mills-Nam, who happened to be in the UK. And if anyone is into activism, the three principles, or just wants a really beautiful perspective, I'd really urge you to look her up.
Yeah.
And she's really a real powerhouse. And we were talking about what we used it, but like the self-created self, or I can't think of the words, but you know, like I don't know the exact words she used, but you know, like how we create things, like how we see ourselves and how that becomes a barrier, or how we relate to ourselves and the things we make up. Yeah. We don't even realize that are in our subconscious, and they're just habits of thinking. That's how I like to think about it.
That's it.
But we don't see them until we see them, and sometimes it's helpful to be in exploration, because to me, I think once you see them, then there's kind of a bit of a chink in the armor. You can't quite see them the same way again.
Well, that's it. It's like throwing flour on the invisible man. Like, I see you now. The thing is, at that point, this is how it looks to me. I don't know if you see it like this, George, but there's both a huge opportunity and a kind of potential danger, right? So take me as an example, you know, bumbles through 30, however many years of life, not thinking, well, I couldn't be ADHD though, because I got through school and I did this, like, you know, all this kind of stuff. Talking about someone who trained and worked in special educational needs for many years as well. Like, this is how deep that stuff can go. And then being like, hang on a minute. And then going and uncovering how some of the ways that my neurology works, and that being very, like, some blind spots kind of disappearing, and how wonderful and kind of helpful and affirming and all those kinds of things. And then there's also, if we're not careful, this potential that we can kind of identify with something new. Now, that's true of you know, uncovering, you know, as I see it as well, it's sort of like working with people around alcohol a lot in my world, and in other programs, it's like people come to realize, oh my goodness me, there's energy that wants to move, there's sadness or there's grief. But we want to be careful not to kind of re-identify with the new thing, because if we're not careful, we'll move from kind of innocently using alcohol to avoid or move away from, to then re-identifying with something else. And I've heard people say things like, you know, walking around, well, you know, I'm broken, and that's just another identification pattern. So exactly. This is it. It's like a wonderful opportunity, but I think without this, not just this understanding, without something deeper than you, because I think the underlying belief in a lot of the science is basically you are your neurology. Neurology creates your reality. But it's spiritual, right? So the thing is, if someone comes to realize who they are before and beyond their psychology, then suddenly they can start learning about themselves and, you know, really, oh, wow, that's why that's like that. This is how I can help myself at work. That's very helpful. But it doesn't become another stick to beat yourself with, or another box to limit yourself.
Exactly. And exactly that. Like, we've got enough things to beat ourselves up. We don't need more. And I think that's it, isn't it? It's like when you start to see you're beating yourself up with, that's not it, or you're limiting yourself.
That's it.
It's not none of these things, they keep you, there's a gift, isn't it, that we can keep. I like to see, I think in my quote, I used the Gloria Steiner, and I think there's something so beautiful in what she said. It said the first problem for all of us, men and women, is not to learn, but to unlearn.
Mm.
And that's from Gloria Steiner. And I just think that's just where it's at. It's like it's an opportunity to unlearn. Everything is an opportunity to unlearn and to peel back the things of the onion to, always
Subtractive, right? Yeah, that's
yeah.
Mm.
Not to pile more on or to beat ourselves up. It's an opportunity to unlearn, because who knows? Like, we're all infinite possibility, right?
That's it. That's it. The way I often talk about it, the strapline for rebel spirituality is wisdom doesn't follow rules. And by rules, I kind of mean it's innocent, of course, like it bumps up against our conditioning or our ways of relating to the world, or women can't do that, or men can't do this, or whatever it might be, or people from where I'm from, or, and that kind of stuff. It's like, like you said so beautifully, George, it's invisible until it's not. Like we believe the edges of reality. We think that's the edge of reality. We don't realize it's actually the edge of our thought-generated internal perceptual reality, which is very different. And suddenly you have that insight and something melts and there's a new area on the map and you're like, no freaking way. And I think this is what's the promise of this, is that in amongst the magic of learning how we tick in this inform, we can look at the infinite potential of who we are from the formless. And like Sid says, that opening of the missing link when he says, with hope and faith as beacons, anything can happen. When miracles, when he's talking about anything, it's like I'm struck by how many times I've come back to that word anything. Because in terms of, the kinds of some of the things that I thought would just never shift or change. And here's the kind of paradox, right? It's like, so when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I had really quite intense OCD from the ages of 4 or 5 through until I was my teenagers. So intense that when I was 10 or 11, I couldn't read most books because I was somewhere in the system, I thought something terrible was going to happen if I read books on certain themes. And I'm like, and a few years ago, off the back of a plant medicine experience, some of that stuff came back. Now, it appeared, but I love it. It didn't have me, like you said. And I came to realize, this is as it's meant to be. It's just another vibration. It's being thrown out. It doesn't mean you're going backwards or any of that. It's just life shifting energy out of you. And and I felt a real healing from that. Now, without this understanding, I could innocently have identified with that, gone right into a panic spiral, so it's profound, the difference that this can make to people. And I think every time somebody writes a book like you have, or hopefully, has a conversation like we're having now, has the potential to just kind of touch someone in a way they didn't expect, hopefully, right? And it just melts another part on the map for them and brings up something new, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God, it feels like do you know, we've been talking for nigh on, I think, nearly an hour. I think it's at least 50 minutes. That disappeared. Yeah. Like, is there anything? I have a feeling we'll be doing this again. If I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak for you, but it's great. It's lovely to have you here. Is there anything that you'd like our listeners to know, or anything that you're up to in the world, or zero pressure? But if you want to share anything, feel free.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious. Like, I'd love to hear what people make of this conversation. Oh. I'm on a journey as well in this conversation always, and what they hear in their life is serious, if it's helpful, if it's not. And I'm just curious to people. I'm really curious. I'm really open and curious. As I say, I'm on a journey. I have no idea. But, if you're curious to buy the book, it's on Amazon. You can get it.
I'll link that in the notes.
I did start doing, there's a few videos that you get when you sign up at the end. You can get some like free extra download videos, and then there's also I did record a few podcasts, so I have got loads more that I haven't yet released, whether that will happen, but I guess it's more, I'm just curious, and I'd love to have more conversations with you, Sam. I think it's been really powerful.
Yeah, me too.
And I just wish everyone, really, from the bottom of my heart, like I wish people our lives are serious, but I really mean it, and I don't mean that you're not going to have hard times, but that you see even the power in those hard times, and you see beyond them and the power in them, and sometimes, it sounds quite cliched that they can be kind of transformative, and sometimes they're just really, really hard, and that's okay too. Like, we're not saying should have a transformative experience of everything you go through, because
No.
let's face it, sometimes life is really hard, and sometimes we do need to disappear, and sometimes we do, like watch rubbish TV to sort of mute whatever we do to look after ourselves. So I would just urge people to be kind to yourself and look after yourself, and do what makes sense to you to look after yourself and be kind to yourself, whatever's going on for you, and to follow that, and to I think, Sam and I, we just feel at the start, I can speak for me, I feel at the start of always turning towards that soul, and it gets clouded over sometimes. It really does. And then, and in silly situations, often it gets clouded over very quickly, and I completely lose touch with it and make an idiot of myself and all the rest of it. But, it is always there. We just have to, remember it's there, and get more in touch with the quieter voice rather than the noisy voice that's in our head interpreting. And if people are listening to this, like, what voice? Well, that's the voice, like that's saying to you now. There's something a bit, like the one that's the constant commentary, and then there's something else that you get a feeling, or you get something that's a bit quieter sometimes, and I don't even know how to describe it. And I'm sure lots of people have tried. I don't know, but yeah, I just wish people are really, from the bottom of my heart, a life less serious, and much love to everyone. And really, Sam, I really feel very grateful. I didn't know how this was going to go. As I said, it's a bit of a strange time in my life, but I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk with you and
my
to
pleasure.
everyone here. So really
It's
lovely.
Genuinely my pleasure. It's so lovely. I will link to the book in the show notes. So it's called A Life Less Serious, if anyone wants to go straight to Amazon or wherever. And I'll talk to you afterwards, George. And if there's any way to contact you, I'll put that in the show.
There is.
Yeah, for people who might, want to, because you're in London, right? You're around.
I'm in London, and I do stuff online, and I'm open to, and if everyone's got ideas for this, I'm really open. I'm just open.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. So good to see you, as always.
So good to see you.
Awesome.